What's up, CC Circle, and welcome back to another episode of Who's the Baby, a podcast where me and my emotional support mug dive into everything inner child. On today's episode, I would like to dive into empathy. And I think this topic is really important because I think it's something that people assume that it's something you're born with. And just like everything else in life, I'm here to tell you that empathy is a skill. And it's a skill that can be built. Sometimes it can be built rather quickly, and other times, depending on your person, it can take years. I really want to dive into this and how it relates to our children, because some kids are really great at empathy and are born with just this internal knowing of how to relate to others really well, and others really struggle with it. And if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, it makes sense. When we're little, our main goal is to survive. We have this very egocentric view of the world and how we need to make ourselves survive the day. It's nothing to be ashamed of if your child is lacking in that area, but I want to have us relate a little differently to empathy, or what we think empathy does for us or can do for us in certain situations. I am naturally a very empathetic person. I relate to people very well. It's something that I do believe I was born with, and I didn't really struggle too much with learning that skill. It's definitely something that I have worked on and continue to work on in my own personal self-development journey. And it's something I don't think we'll ever stop learning or stop finding things out about ourselves. And that's one thing that I really love about empathy, is that your capacity will always be able to grow with it. The definition of empathy, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, there's a couple different definitions actually. So number one is the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another. The second definition is the act of imagining one's ideas, feelings, or attitudes as fully inhabiting something observed. The imaginative projection of a subjective state into an object so that the object appears to be infused with it. So I just want us to consider what that might look like for you, or what that might mean. And that way you can help yourself build the skills you might need in order to build your empathy. Imagining one's ideas, feelings, or attitudes as fully inhabiting something observed, as infuse it with yourself, that's a pretty serious thing. You might be like, I'm way off. I don't ever feel that. How do we do that? By taking small little bites, by taking teeny, teeny, tiny little acts. It can be something that annoys you. And something so small, right? It can be while you're driving and someone cuts you off, or you see someone driving pretty recklessly and you're like, right? It just gets you. That is your little trigger point to know, well, there's my growth edge. And how can I exhibit a little more empathy in this situation? And so empathy would be, sometimes I drive like a maniac, and it's because I have something I need to do, or it's very important, or I'm running late, or my sister's in labor, or whatever, right? It can be a million different reasons. But trying to input yourself into that person's situation, and even just giving yourself that space to think about that, usually can really transition the way you feel about it, can really change your perspective entirely. And that is a beautiful thing. When we look at the first definition, the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to the feelings, thoughts, experiences of another. That's more of where I think people generally understand empathy. Just being able to see someone's point of view, right? Like I said, you don't have to necessarily agree with it, but just be able to understand it is a huge step in empathy. And it's a huge part in understanding each other as humans and saying, I understand you. I'm aware of your situation. I'm observing what you are going through, and I see it. For example, mom to mom. Anytime I see a mom struggling in the parking lot, or struggling to get her kids in the car, or struggling to get items into the car with the kids screaming in the back, even if it's just catching eyes, catching a look, and just, you're doing great, mom. You're doing great. Something as simple as that can change the trajectory of her nervous system, can change the trajectory of their day. Just being aware that I see you, saying this shit's hard, I acknowledge that. and you're doing a great job. It's very simple. Empathy. Who knew? The way that I relate, or the way that I think about empathy now, has changed a lot. And this helped me blossom when I started my spiritual journey. This was probably only within the past few years that now I think about empathy in a different perspective, with my addition to a more spiritual sense of self. The spiritual journey has taken me a long time to get comfortable with. I don't think it was for lack of interest, to be honest with you. It was mostly that I am a very science driven individual. I really like having proof, and having faith was a big struggle for me. It's not something that came super naturally to me. Now, as you dive deeper into consciousness and awareness and self-awareness, wherever you are in your self-development journey, there's always going to be the question of, what are we all doing here? Why do we all exist? Why are there so many of us? You have all these existential questions. The more that I learn my own consciousness, the deeper I go with that, the more I understand. And you may have even heard in your own spiritual practice, whatever that may be, we are one. We are all one. And to me, before, I understood that in a way that helped me relate with nature, but so much with humans. And even though I am very empathetic naturally, sometimes it's difficult to relate to people who are very different from you. I recognize that, and I totally understand that, and I understand why. Again, going back to early humans, anyone who was different than you may have posed a threat to your tribe, to your society. My self-development journey has led me to this, we are one. Now, what that means for me, and this is solely for me, but again, I'm going to relate this as to how this will help with empathy. We are all iterations of ourselves, okay? All of us are me. All of us are you. We are all living different expressions and different experiences in this same timeline. Okay, that might be a struggle for some of us who haven't moved past time is not linear. That's okay. Just hang with me for a second. Now, what this helps me do in my empathy is that it helps me remember, and yes, I mean remember. It helps me remember when I was you. Again, that might be really out there for some of us. I totally get that. And what that means is, if I'm really struggling to understand, let's say I'm in a disagreement with someone and we're really struggling to see each other's points of view, okay? I then have to remember a time in my being, as I know it now in my consciousness, of when I felt misunderstood, I felt unheard, I felt this person really just doesn't get it. And then I can move through it with a different lens of empathy, meaning I can choose grace in that moment and say, I hear you, but I just feel differently. It allows me to change my response to a given situation that might be uncomfortable for me, or a given conversation that might be uncomfortable to me. And when I say I remember, it's not that I remember being you, or maybe I do, right? It's just that I remember a time in my memory, in my consciousness, of that feeling, of where they're coming from. And it allows me then to respond differently. It allows me to respond with kindness. It allows me to respond with a pause. It allows me to honor whatever I'm feeling inside and say, yeah, I hear what you're saying, and we feel differently about that. I also want to take a second to iterate that empathy can be self-deprecating. Empathy can be a trauma response. I am aware of, and I do believe, yes, I was born with a very high level of empathy, but also I became very situationally aware, even as a young person. And that can be a trauma response. Hypervigilance is a very strong survival instinct. I don't think it was necessarily childhood trauma, like right from my upbringing. I think it was more situational, in that perhaps in my tribe back in early human days, I was the lookout. I was the scout. I was the person who noticed things that others didn't. I was the person who viewed threats a little quicker or processed that information a little quicker or it came easier to me, right? So we all have our jobs to do in a tribe. We all have our strengths, and that just happens to be one of mine. You can be overly empathetic. Not that feeling is wrong. It's the overcompensation in your actions, what you do next with that information, that leads us into a negative path. I can acknowledge someone and where they are. That doesn't mean that I have to own that experience for them, or it doesn't mean that I have to do anything about that other than acknowledge that I'm seeing them struggle. Okay. And especially in parenting, that's something that I've had to really learn and become okay with, the fact that it's okay for my child to struggle. It's actually really beneficial for her to struggle. It's also okay for me to witness her struggling, acknowledge her struggle, and still let her go through that struggle aside from her, not take it and own it for her. And that took a lot of figuring things out for me. Boundaries, what's mine and what's yours? And is this struggle actually helping you? In most cases, when you're that small, yes, because it's a new experience that you are learning or seeing for the first time, and it's new information as to how you will have to move through the world, and you'll have to figure out how to store that information and then have it so that next time it'll get a little easier for you. Don't have to fix the struggle. I don't have to own that emotional backlash from it. We can be in it together. We can co-regulate together, and she can still move through it as though it's hers, because it is. I want to talk about being in a disagreement and how our society has really changed our ability in our communication to allow for disagreement. Disagreement is a beautiful thing. It's offering a different perspective of yours. You don't have to agree at the end of the day. You don't. But it is allowing each of you to bring your own perspective to a conversation and then decide what to do. Culturally, we are more pleasing in that we don't want to disrupt or aggravate our nervous systems at all anymore to have those conversations. But when we do that, when we break through that discomfort, when we face those difficulties and still move through that anyway, that's where you then find a broader range of connection. That's where you find more understanding. That's where you find more empathy. And it's okay that you can move through that and still say, I feel differently, and still hold true to yourself and your values and your boundaries, and still hold true to who you are without having to feel like you have to comply. That's okay. Within the kids who find it difficult to empathize, parents, I don't want you to feel guilty or feel like you're not doing enough. It's just a skill building activity that they need to work on. There's plenty of things that I can talk about and that we can offer with empathy building skills. But mainly and most importantly, it's mirroring and showing them your version of that. Right? For example, when I get dysregulated and I try to parent, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult. I then have to show myself empathy for being a human and say, whew, okay, what do I need first to help me regulate, to get back to a place where I can be a better version of my parenting, the person that I want to show up as. And when I model that, my daughter is picking up on those cues. She's picking up on those skills. Anyone that ever said grace is weakness or, grace is lack of boundaries, no. Empathy towards yourself is grace. And that's one of the highest forms of self-love and self-care that we can offer ourselves. Compassion and grace. With your children, it's very easy to force empathy. Instead of trying to force that empathy or force apologies or force any behavior changes, let's remain curious and let's just ask questions and let's just keep their little brains making the connections. making those conclusions on their own. The more that they see you doing that and modeling that, that will become their norm. It may take a few times for them to practice, of course, but the more that they are allowed to practice and maybe get it wrong, that one time when they do get it right will be really worthwhile. It will be extremely worthwhile. Empathy, I also believe, is something that we need right now. Human to human. Empathy is how we relate. Empathy can be how we communicate, how we raise our vibration, how we help each other. I don't want to get too far into this without mentioning the exact impact that it has. Empathy is everything. And we are here in this human experience to find ourselves and to find who we are in our authentic being. But we are humans. We are communal. We coexist. We co-regulate. There's a reason why we are a pack. We are communal animals. And that hasn't been evolved out of us yet. We need each other. We need empathy. We need to stick together, to see each other, to hear each other, to understand one another. And that's not only with verbal communication. Empathy doesn't have to be verbal. It can be touch. It can be facial expressions. It can be a gesture, a high five, a hug. It can be as easy as an I love you. Peace, right? So if there's anything that you take away from today, I would like it to be, how can I strengthen my empathy skills today? What can I do that allows me to see someone a little bit more for who they are or whatever situation they're going through? It can be while you're driving. It can be while you're late waiting in line at the store or the bank. If you feel yourself getting frustrated, that's a perfect place to try out empathy, thinking about that person. And this might be really hard for them to do today. And maybe even thinking about the reasons why it might be so hard for them today. Something as small as that will give you broader range in yourself to pause, to examine, to be aware, and to draw your own conclusions. For me, especially being an American, we are very focused on ourselves. And in order for us to get through all of the things that we're going through right now as a country, we need each other. The more we can practice how to need each other a little more, or how to give grace, I think that's the only way through. For me and my emotional support tea today, this is a local tea crafter. I'll see you on the other side.